Hi there, welcome and thank you for stopping by e-GMAT to solve this official SC question. My name is Stacy Trepanier. I'm one of the sentence correction experts here on the e-GMAT team, and I'm going to work through this official question on female writers of France with you from OG Advanced. Now, I love this question, not just because it combines my love of women in European classical literature and history, but also because of the metaphorical meaning the author uses. And the meaning-based approach is perfect for solving such questions. So let's get to work utilizing this sentence structure to extract those key aspects and really figure out what's going on here. Now, as we begin reading, we see before Colette. Now, even if I don't know what or who Colette is, I can piece together that before is telling me that something happened before this entity. So I read to figure out what. Before Colette, the female writers of France had been aristocrats. Okay, so I know that before this person or thing, Colette, the female writers of France had been, and what had they been? They had been aristocrats. Okay, so before Colette, and at this point I can deduce that Colette is also a writer. So before Colette, the female writers of France had been these nobles or of this high society aristocrats. All right, I keep reading to find out more about these writers, and I read from Mademoiselle de Lafayette to Anne de Noël. And okay, this modifier here from Mademoiselle de Lafayette to Anne de Noël is giving me information about some of these examples of these female writers or these female writers that had been aristocrats. So these are a couple of examples of these female writers from France. Okay, so before Colette, these female writers, examples of who these female writers were, and then I get more information. There were no Jane Austens or Bronte sisters. Okay, so now I know that in France, where these female writers were, there were no Jane Austens or Bronte sisters. Okay, so I get these two references to these English writers. All right, making sense even if you don't know they're English writers. You don't need to know that. Perhaps because there were also no clergymen's daughters. So I get this reasoning that there were no Jane Austens or Bronte sisters, and then the reason for that is perhaps because there were almost no clergymen's daughters. Okay, so the author seems to be pointing to these Jane Austens and these Bronte sisters as kind of examples of what is not in France at this time period, and then provides us the reason why these Jane Austens and Bronte sisters aren't there. Now, we do not need to be experts in European literature to infer from the context here that these four English writers, and by four I mean the one Jane Austen and the three Bronte sisters, okay, that the author is referencing these English writers metaphorically and no way intends to communicate that Austen and the Bronte sisters were in France or were not in France physically. Instead, our author is expressing that there were no writers in France like these writers, right? So there were not these types of writers in France. So the message is conveyed using there were no Jane Austens or Bronte sisters, which metaphorically is stating there were no types of writers in France, right? Like these. Okay, so this is kind of a metaphorical way of expressing that the female writers of France had been aristocrats, and there were no types of writers in France like Austen or the Bronte sisters, right? And perhaps that reason is because there were almost no clergymen's daughters, okay? And you don't have to have the history background to know that Jane Austen and the Bronte sisters were all daughters of clergymen, all right? So we can pull these key aspects out and conclude that this first piece up here tells us that prior to Colette, the female writers in France were nobles or of nobility, And then that second piece tells us that there were no writers who were like Jane Austen or Bronte sisters who were the daughters of clergymen. This is that second piece down here, those types of writers that we were talking about in France. And then that third piece is this is possibly because there were almost no clergymen's daughters in France. Okay, and so that's this reasoning that we're provided down here. So once we kind of spend the time to really infer and understand this middle metaphor right here that the author is utilizing, it's not too difficult to extract that meaning, but we have to really understand the intended communication here. It's very straightforward if we take that time to read slowly and extract that intended meaning that's being communicated. So let's move on to that error analysis. Now, as we read through the original sentence, looking for errors, we notice the sentence reads pretty smoothly, like a good piece of literature. And one sign that the sentence may be free from errors is when it does read smoothly. And we can go through our foundational checklist and realize that we have no subject-verb issues. You can see those subjects in blue, and the verbs have all been highlighted in green for you. You can see everything agrees in number. All the verbs are in the past tense, properly communicating these classical literary writers in the past. We have no pronoun issues that we're dealing with. All of our modifiers are properly communicating and describing what they need to be describing. We have no comparison or idiom issues. So our original sentence is looking pretty solid. The meaning is working. There's no grammatical issues that we're dealing with, but we do need to stay astute and make sure we can reject all our answer choices on solid ground in order to be able to confidently accept option A. So let's get busy moving through these answer choices. Now let's take a look at choice B here. The big difference between this choice and option A is actually a small change, but it's a small change that does make a big difference, and that's the change from no to not. So just adding a T into the sentence makes the difference here. Now, these both can be used for negation, but no is an adjective and is used before a noun or a noun phrase, and not is an adverb. So we can reject this choice because using not instead of no here makes this option unidiomatic. So B is out. Now let's take a look at choice C. There's a little bit more going on here. Immediately, we can also reject choice C for that usage of not, which we can spot right away. We also have a subject-verb error here. You'll notice the use of the singular was instead of the plural were. Now, this is incorrect here for a couple of reasons. We do need the plural were here because we have in the non-underlined portion the plural Bronte sisters. And you'll notice the use of the conjunction or here. So we do have Jane Austen's or Bronte sisters. So both of those subjects need to agree with the verb, and Bronte sisters is plural. Thus, we need the plural were to agree with the Bronte sisters, which is plural. Also, look at the change of Jane Austen here. Now, the singular Jane Austen doesn't go along with that meaning that we were talking about, that the writer is expressing metaphorically that there were no Jane Austens or Bronte sisters, meaning no writers like Jane Austen. So Jane Austen's is actually supposed to be meaning or referring to types of writers being plural. So the singular Jane Austen is kind of messing with the intended meaning that we discussed in that meaning analysis. And the final error we have here is the change in the conjunction or to nor. Now, there's nothing wrong with using neither nor here, but nor is kind of flying solo here without its bosom buddy, neither, and that makes this structurally incorrect. So choice C is going to be out. Now, choice D we can reject for the same reasons we just went through with choice C. We have that singular was, we have the use of not, and again, we have the singular a Jane Austen. So we can quickly get rid of choice D for the same reasons we just discussed in choice C. And choice E, again, the singular was is incorrect because we know we need that plural were, and the singular Jane Austen is going to be out because we know we need Jane Austens to refer to those plural writers, referring to that meaning the types of writers in that time period. So choice E is going to be scratched off, which leaves us with choice A is our correct answer choice. Straightforward meaning, the sentence reads beautifully and no grammatical errors. A few quick takeaways for you. Always make sure you spend that time up front to understand what the sentence intends to communicate. This is especially true in sentences that use metaphorical meanings, where we have to spend a bit more time inferencing exactly what the author intends to communicate. Make sure the proper expressions are used to express negatives. Just adding that T onto no and changing that to not makes several of our answer choices unidiomatic because it creates that grammatical error. And be mindful of those subject-verb errors that sneak in there, and those choices make things incorrect. They sometimes can slip in there and we barely even notice them, but they do make a big difference. From all of us, thank you so much for stopping by. Please make sure you drop a like below. Subscribe to our YouTube channel for more solutions and articles that we have coming your way. Make sure you check out the helpful resources and the links in the description below. And from all of us at e-GMAT, happy learning.